Can everybody see the screen okay? Can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Cool. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll have a few other people join along the way. Just as a heads up for the format for today, I'm going to share just a little bit about what Soul Safari is and my motivation for doing this, and talking a little bit about coaching and some of the outcomes of Soul Safari. And then I'll be sharing some pictures and just talking through some of the activities for the upcoming Kenya trip that's in April, and South Africa Lesotho trip that is in May. And then we have John and Melissa and Kristen, who actually participated in the previous Soul Safari in Nepal. They will be sharing some of their experiences and outcomes that they had from their Soul Safari experience. So really where this came about started several years ago when I was in China. I had been working on my own and finding business had been pretty successful, and I was starting to lack a drive and excitement about my work, and pretty soon I ended up with a very serious burnout. And at the time I wasn't sure what to do, and I remember really spending a lot of time looking for more purpose and meaning, and I thought I would find that in accomplishing more and doing more. I think that's exactly what led me to my burnout. And as I signed up to do an MBA program, which really for me was looking for something different, something new, the focus of the MBA program was on personal leadership. So right from the get-go, one of our first classes, we were told we would have to do a lot of introspective work and keep a gratitude journal and do a lot of individual self-work. And at the time I thought, you know, this is a little bit odd for a business school. I'm just here because I want to get more skills and build out my business more. And what I realized is that introspective work that we were expected to do and that we had to participate in the leadership class was exactly what I needed. And that really set me off on this journey of coaching and expanding self-awareness. Had somebody told me at that time when I was burned out that what I was really looking for was connecting with myself and spending time doing reflection and looking for new ways to look at the world, I would have laughed. It just didn't seem very applicable. But that's exactly where I found fulfillment. And that's where I found that what I was doing that was giving me so much success was actually killing me at the same time. And it was preventing me from really feeling fulfilled at work. And so the self-leadership and MBA experience and the coaching that I did as part of the MBA experience really opened my eyes to the way forward is to pause and take some time to figure out what I want to do, kind of reboot. And so that's where my coaching journey started. And it was through coaching that I had a lot of these insights. Sorry, I'm just gonna make sure you're on mute. That would help. I've just got a little bit of static. And so as I hired a coach when I did my MBA, I started to realize some things about myself that I didn't know before. One of the things that was really powerful for me to learn was that I didn't know how to take care of myself. I wasn't putting my needs before anything else. And I saw myself as someone that could get things done and do hard things and accomplish, you know, hard tasks and projects and stay up late. But I didn't know how to take care of myself. And as I began to do coaching and figure out where some of my challenges were coming from, I realized that that was a big challenge for me. So Soul Safari really has been part of my own journey to further my need for purpose and fulfillment. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to share that with other people. So I still work my full-time manufacturing job, and Soul Safari is really a passion project to help people have that same experience that I've had. So one of the things I want to talk about is, before we dive into what the actual trips look like, is the difference between self-awareness and learning skills. Often we think that when we're lacking something or we want something different, we focus on learning more skills, how to do something better, how to do something new. Self-awareness, on the other hand, is learning and becoming aware of things that we weren't aware of before. Skills we can learn and practice, like speaking, for example. And if we don't do it for a long time, we kind of lose that skill. With self-awareness, when we're able to see and recognize something new and something different that we haven't seen or recognized before, we can't unsee it. It doesn't go away. So one of the analogies I want to use today that I've been thinking about is at church, when some of the younger men start wearing a white tie, sometimes at the back of their collar isn't tucked in and their tie is hanging out. And I've heard that referred to as the deacon's syndrome. And I was thinking about that a lot this week. When someone starts wearing a tie for the first time, they go and look in the mirror and they tie their tie and everything looks fine. It looks perfect. But at the back, their tie is hanging out and it looks like they don't know how to put a tie on. And unless someone tells them, or unless they look in the mirror backwards or do something that they weren't able to do before, they wouldn't even be aware that their tie is hanging out. And that's really what coaching and self-awareness brings. It allows us to use tools and see ourselves and our situation in a way that we couldn't before. And as soon as you're able to see that, you can't unlearn that. That stays with you and your behavior changes. Just like when someone points out, hey, your tie isn't tucked in properly, you don't really need a mirror. You know, maybe the first time you do it, you need to look backwards in the mirror and fix your tie. But going forward, you'll know, I better check my tie because it can hang out in the back. It can look good in the front and not in the back. So that's a analogy I'm going to refer back to today as we dive in here. Soul Safari for me personally fills three pretty distinct needs that I recognize I had that weren't being met or being fulfilled. At the time I was living in China, I was working from home. Business was going really well, but I really lacked the engagement with other people. In a week, I would maybe have a face-to-face or phone call meeting with one or two people briefly. And I felt very disconnected and like I really needed a social circle. The Soul Safari is an opportunity for me to connect and engage with other people on a deeper level. From the time I was born, my dad could probably chime in on this if he wanted. But from the time I was really little, I've had a passion for pushing boundaries and trying to do things that haven't been done before and kind of push and break the rules sometimes. And that's something that stayed with me. Something I feel natural at, and I feel like I don't always get a chance to do that in my work, and it's something that I feel like I really need. Over the years, as some of you know, I was born and raised overseas. I lived in Kenya and Nepal and South Africa, China and Thailand now for almost 27 years. And until recently, until about 4 years ago, I had never really connected back in Kenya or Nepal. And those were such defining parts of me that I had just left behind when I moved. And so Soul Safari is an opportunity for me to reconnect with those places that I grew up in. So it serves some very specific purposes for me. And I've realized I can use that in creating Soul Safari to create a really growing, expanding opportunity for other people to see the world and see themselves differently and find new ways forward, new ways of seeing the world and finding more satisfaction and fulfillment. Before we dive into the actual trip pictures here, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what coaching is. So coaching has become more and more popular as of recent, and there's all sorts of different types of coaching. There's health coaches, there's sports coaches, there's life coaches, executive coaches, and they're not all the same thing. So when I talk about coaching, I'm talking about coaching as the International Coaching Federation defines it. As a coach, you're trained in a specific set of skills to facilitate a conversation with somebody. So a coach, when I talk about coaching, is not me telling you what to do as the coach. Me as the coach, it's my job and responsibility to create a conversation with someone that I'm coaching so that they can have realizations and understandings and explore what their possibilities are. It's not my job as a coach to judge or to give feedback or direction. That's kind of specifically not allowed. And when coaching is done effectively, when someone's willing to be coached and a coach is able to use the skills well, it creates a deep conversation around what's possible and what's blocking you from moving forward. And the conversation is very focused on the present going into the future. So it can be directed at goals. What are you trying to accomplish? What's not working? What would you like to see more of? What's holding you back from making the next step? Those are the types of conversations that are asked in a coaching conversation. So when I talk about coaching, that's really what we're talking about. A soul safari is designed for an individual to have a very powerful, impactful individual experience. Some of that individual experience is created by coming on this trip and interacting with the group. But at the end of the day, the coaching and the soul safari experience is designed for an individual to have a very deepening, growing, expanding experience of what am I about? What am I doing? How can I move forward? It creates the time and space and uses coaching to facilitate a breakthrough, a realization, a deeper understanding, a different way of looking at things. It's really helpful. With that, we're going to dive right into some of the pictures of the upcoming trips. So these trips are not, the activities on the trips and the location of the trips were not just identified willy-nilly. These are all places that I've lived and grown up in. And the specific activities that we participate in all have a distinct purpose of creating an impactful and meaningful experience. And they're fun. So the idea with a soul safari is to do a balance of connecting with other people, local people, connecting with something in nature and being out of the desk and office environment, and also doing something physical and fun. So these aren't hardcore adventure excursions, but it's a meaningful adventure that anybody can join and be part of and find meaning in. So Kenya, I was born in Kenya and lived there till I was about 13 or 14, somewhere in there. So Kenya holds kind of a special place in my heart. This is a photo from a couple of years ago. This was pretty common for me growing up, but this was just outside. We found a chameleon, and this is Joel kind of encountering it for the first time. It's very curious. You can look at both of the looks on their faces. There's a look of curiosity there. Kenya is known for its wildlife. I've been to several game parks, and Kenya really is unparalleled. And so part of this Kenyan excursion is going to be spending a night camping in one of the game parks, as well as a couple days spent on an actual safari. This is a blind rhino that is kept kind of separate in an enclosure, so he doesn't get killed by the other wild rhinos. And you have a chance to kind of feed it, and the people look after it. And this is one of the critically endangered species that I feel like in the next 20 years, it may not even be possible to see them in the wild anymore. So Kenya is a great place to see that. Another neat place here that we'll visit is the Daphne David Sheldrick Foundation. And this is located close to Nairobi, and it's an elephant orphanage. So all of the elephants here are rescued from the wild as orphans. Their mothers were either shot or killed for poaching or for invading someone's farmland, or sometimes the babies fall and get stuck in the mud or in a well. So it's a really neat place. With elephants have such a community-centered relationship with one another, and it's fascinating to see how they have to set things up to take care of these orphans, and eventually they release them into the wild. But it's a process that takes several years. So you get to interact with the orphans, and it's a really neat experience. Here's one of the pictures I took from a couple of years ago. So they'll drink milk, I think, till they're 2 or 3 years old. And at the orphanage, a keeper needs to live and be by the elephant's side 24 hours a day. So the keepers sleep with the elephants because there's this separation anxiety that kills them when they're young. We'll spend a night camping on the coast of Lake Naivasha. So this is in the Great Rift Valley. And the neat thing about this camp is the hippos come out at night to graze on the grass. And so in this area, you can, we'll take a boat ride out and you can see the hippos in the water, but at night they come right out to the grass. And they do have a small electric fence that they turn out at night. This particular hippo, they had just cut the grass and it had been waiting there. And early afternoon, it came out to eat the big pile of grass. Close to Lake Naivasha here on the shores, there's a place where we'll do a game walk. Here are some bones. We went several years ago, and this is little Joel fascinated. He was fascinated with bones and kept collecting them, wanted to take them home. But it's a neat way to be out walking, interact with the animals, wild animals. There's no lions there, though. My wife, Chriselle, has been doing a lot of midwifery work lately, and this is Moffat. He has created a birth center in one of the big slums of Nairobi, and he has kind of poured his passion into this project, and Chriselle has been working with him, and just in December spent a few nights there assisting delivering babies. So he has a really neat outlook. He's super positive, and what he's been able to accomplish and the way that he's gone about it is an incredible example of leadership and what an individual can do even when they're faced with a lot of challenges and competing issues. So Moffat is one of the people we'll spend a little bit of time with, and he'll share his story with us on the Kenyan safari. Simon on the right was a security guard. He worked at our house growing up, and I used to follow him around like a little puppy for years. And over the years, we have kept in touch, and he has moved out to his home village and been farming for the last 15 or 20 years. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been helping him and sort of mentoring a little bit on setting up a mango drying factory. And we just, I think in December, just barely finished some sort of hostel rooms on the property where people can go stay and do a farm stay. So Simon and his wife, Joy, I've known them for almost 30 years now. He's in the process now of running a mango drying facility, and that's one of the night stays on the Kenyan safari. It's really neat to be out in a rural setting and just have a totally different viewpoint of what life is like out there. And this is Simon's little grandson. He doesn't live out there on the farm, but they were home for Christmas while we were there, and it was neat to see him out in the bush, but on a cell phone nonetheless. This is the top of the little hostel where we'll stay. It has a beautiful view, and listening to the birds out here is incredible. part of the Kenyan trip will include plenty of sightseeing in the game parks on safari. This is Grizel with the buffalo. The buffalo is about 7 or 8 feet from the car. And here's a picture of some lions that we saw at one of the parks that we'll be going to. And we had spent most of the day looking for them. We didn't find them. And on our way out, we saw one of the rangers, and he got in the car with us and helped us track them down. The neat thing about these rangers is they live in the park in a tent, and they have a gun, but they're in there with all these wild animals. It was really neat to interact with him. This is when we dropped him off on our way out. So that's the Kenya trip. This is, this looks like just sort of a fun trip that would be neat to go on, but each of these experiences really helps put us in a place that is a little bit uncomfortable and in a different environment. And what that does is it allows us to look at things completely differently. And when we experience it, in Kenya, for example, when you're out on the farm, all of a sudden you start having realizations about how you could look at things in your own life differently. And so as we use coaching to kind of uncover some of those questions and challenges and aspirations that you have, it's the experience of these kind of distinct aspects of the trip that help bring that out and let you think about them and find ways forward. And that's something I think from the last trip, we'll hear from a couple of the participants from the last trip. I was assuming when we did the first Soul Safari in October that the trip and these experiences themselves would create powerful insights for people. I think my biggest takeaway from the October trip was it was a lot more powerful than I thought. And when I have kind of chatted and debriefed with all of the participants from the Nepal trip, that was a theme that kept coming up, was when I was out hiking, I had this big insight, or when we went and watched people get cremated, it was this big experience. I made this big connection. And so that's something that is kind of hard to describe about the Soul Safari trip. How does it relate to coaching, and what are the outcomes? And the whole thing is a tailor-made fun experience that is an adventure, but really it's an invitation and a facilitation of you making more sense and a deeper connection with what you're about, what your purpose is, what are you going to do differently going forward. And that's what's neat about these trips too, is once you see and understand these insights, you don't unlearn them. You're not learning a skill that can be, that can atrophy after some time. Once you have these insights and you go back home, your outlook on things are different. You're gonna look at problems and challenges differently. There's gonna be things you'll be thankful for and more appreciative for. You'll do things differently. So that's the Kenya trip. If anyone has any specific questions, please fire away on the text, the group chat there. So the Kenya trip is in the beginning of April. The Lesotho, South Africa trip is on the beginning of May. So the reason Lesotho and South Africa is combined, I served a mission, a 2-year mission in South Africa, and one of the areas I served in, it was my last area, was Lesotho. So Lesotho is a really neat country that not a lot is known about, and it's not very touristed. South Africa also has some really incredible things to do and see and experience. And the trip participants will be flying into Johannesburg, and we'll be visiting a few things and working our way down to Lesotho. Lesotho isn't super accessible by plane. So when we talk through this trip, part of it is in South Africa and part of it is in Lesotho. One of the most incredible things about South Africa, and my wife Grisella is from South Africa, is it's in the process of recovering and healing from apartheid. So apartheid was a forced, institutionalized segregation. It was much like what we had in the States, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago, but even more, there's a lot more force involved. And this apartheid regime only started to collapse and fall in the early 90s. And so that's in our lifetime. And so to go there and participate and experience what it's like and what the country's going through and share some of the insights from different points of view from the inside it's a really fascinating and interesting, thought-provoking experience. One of the things on the trip is the Apartheid Museum. This is one of the top-rated museums in the world, and it is it's exhausting to go through it and experience what happened in South Africa and what's happening and what happens in our world today, and it brings about a lot of feelings within ourselves too, of how our upbringing and the way that we've been taught, how that influences how we see the world, how we experience it. And the museum starts off by inviting you through the doors as things were just 20 years ago in South Africa. You segregate. Whites go through one door and everybody else goes through another door, and immediately you're sort of invited into the turmoil of apartheid. One of the places we'll stop is called Tabanchu. It's a township that is deep in one of the mining areas close to Lesotho. One of the neat things is several of these boys here, I know their parents well, and I can tell who belongs to who, because they look so much like their parents. And this is one of the places we'll visit and get sort of a taste of the South African hospitality and a glimpse of what life is like from a township standpoint. It's not usual. Essentially, this experience is with friends and people that I know there, and it's not really an experience you can even create or get on a tour itinerary. Yet it provides really deep insights about how the environment impacts how we think and feel and what we're entitled to. And so stopping here is going to be, we're going to do lunch and do a visit here in the township. And the man in the middle is named Moshe Sibusi. And he's just barely become a police officer. But the last couple of years he started and been running a pizza and Mexican food restaurant in the township. It's been neat to see him grow with that. Mama Tsilo here is on the right. When I was a missionary in Tabanchu, she took us in like her own kids, and we have stayed in close touch with her. And while I was doing school in South Africa, we had her come out and visit several times. And Crizel recorded some of her oral history. And as part of that, we took her to visit her late husband's family in Lesotho. That's where I took this picture. But Mama Tsilo is one of those people that is just so full of love and positivity, and has been through such difficult, challenging, different times and experiences than what most of us have been through. It's a lovely, insightful experience to spend time with her and hear her story. From there, we're going to head into Lesotho. So Lesotho is the small country inside of South Africa. It's known as the Mountain Kingdom. I think its lowest point, it has the highest low point of any country in the world. It's up in the mountains. And the reason it's inside of South Africa is it was the one part of South Africa that nobody could conquer, partly due to the terrain. And it's one of the prettiest places I've been. We'll stay in a resort up in the mountains by a waterfall. And this is May Melusi, and she does a demonstration on the blanket and what life is like in Lesotho. So if any of you have seen Black Panther before, it was filmed essentially in Lesotho. And these blankets that they used are the Basotho blankets. So it's a traditional wool blanket, and all of the items on them are symbolic. So you give and get one of these blankets when you're betrothed, when you're married, when you have a new baby, and the colors and items on them are very symbolic. So she does a demonstration that she calls the blanket ceremony, and she kind of talks through the history of Lesotho, and she ends it with what she's doing right here is she's showing how she has to ride on the pony, which is how everybody gets around there, while nursing a baby. She had to take her baby into the doctor that was like a 3.5, 4 hour pony ride away. So she was showing us how she would carry the baby on the horse, and when the baby would get hungry, she would nurse the baby on the horse. And it's a really neat experience. That's on the agenda for the Soul Safari. They still do a lot of shepherding up there. They sell the wool off for, but throughout Lesotho, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. This is a way of life that is outside of Maseru, the main city. This is sort of people's livelihood. As part of the Soul Safari in South Africa and Lesotho, we're going to do a pony trip and stay overnight in a shepherd hut, shepherd style. And this is unchanged for the past 2,000 years. They still till with wooden plows and cows, and it's very rural and basic, and the people are lovely up here. They get around on these little ponies. They don't look like much, but the ponies can carry and hike these high mountains with incredible. They're bred and work well in the mountains. So this is little Joel on a pony ride a couple of years ago. So we went from the resort village where we were staying and went up to the waterfall. So this is Maletsunyane Falls. In this picture, this is a panorama from the iPhone. The falls look small, but that's 660 feet from where the water drops to the bottom. And one of the activities that we will be doing on this trip for those that can stomach it is a rappel down the side of the waterfall. And so right at the top of the waterfall off to the left, they set up a block and you rappel 660 feet down. It's one of the highest waterfalls or commercial rappels in the world. And I have done it before. Sorry, I'm trying to go back here. It's a neat experience. It's definitely wild and out of everybody's comfort zone. So you come in, and then they load up all the gear on a pony, and the pony you hike down with the pony to the head of the waterfall, rappel down, and then pack up all the gear, and then you hike out. The South African safari also includes some experiences in the game park. So South Africa has some incredible game parks and experiences with wild game. And so even though Kenya is sort of more known for the safari side of things, South Africa has all of the African animals as well. So that's something that we will be spending a bit of time on. This particular picture was taken in the reserve where we'll go. We were there 3 or 4 years ago and got this picture of a leopard, which was really incredible. I've been to the game park, I can't even say how many times, and have never seen a leopard up close, and it was a really neat experience. So that is a wrap with the trips. I'm going to go on video here. Okay, if anyone has any questions about the specific trips, please shoot them on the message and we can answer those. In the meantime, I wanted to talk and give a bit of time for some of the participants from the Nepal Soul Safari to share. So one of the questions that I get a lot is, why go on a soul safari? Why should I take the time off or make the investment to come? What's the outcome going to be? And I've noticed and found that that's a really tricky, it's a really tricky question to answer, because what people's expectations, what they bring with them on the trip, are so different. And so what might be meaningful for me is not meaningful for someone else. But that's really what the outcome of the trip is focused on. It's an opportunity for an individual to really grow and find a way forward, a different way to see things. It gives people an opportunity to reconnect with themselves, to give them the space to think. So I wanted to give a couple of the participants a chance to share briefly, and then we can take some questions after that if anyone has questions. Melissa, are you good to go?
I'm good.
Go ahead.
Okay, so now excuse me, I'm kind of losing my voice, but so Soul Safari was better than I could have ever expected. I kind of what I thought going into it was different than what I thought I'd have some I thought it'd be a lot of fun, but I don't think I really understood how increased my self-awareness would be, and how important that would be from Soul Safari. What I mean by self-awareness, it's just like who I am, what I stand for, and like I had a lot of boundary issues with my job before I went on Soul Safari, and then coming back from Soul Safari, I just saw a lot of the boundary issues that I needed to change, and since Soul Safari, I've been able to do those and not have clients walk all over me, and not have friends and family, and just be able to set expectations a little bit better. And it gave me like that self-awareness that I needed. It was also very challenging, which was really good for me, because now even going into the new year, I've noticed that I needed the challenge from Soul Safari, of like we hiked a lot, and the challenge from Soul Safari was really good because it gave me that confidence to know that I could do it. And so even making goals this year, I've had the goals, I've been able to do it and set those expectations and set the challenging goals that I wanted to this year, knowing that I could do it because I climbed a mountain in Nepal and I can do anything now. And so it gave me a lot of self-awareness, and as well it built my confidence a lot. It gave me a lot of insights to myself and who I am. So
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Kristen, do you want to go ahead and share? And John, I know I haven't had a chance to chat with you. Just shoot me a message or a thumbs up if you are willing and able to share. If not, no problem.
Hey.
Go ahead,
Okay, I was trying to unmute. Am I on there? Okay, so my Soul Safari trip, I had never traveled outside of the United States, and I did not have a passport. And I've since told Peter that this was kind of a big deal emotionally for me. I'm kind of an adventurous person. I've always thought so, but having never taken an opportunity like this, even applying for the passport and receiving the passport was like an emotional step forward and a personal step forward, and provided some sense of freedom that I didn't recognize that I needed. And then prior to going, our first session, I told Peter I was just all in. I was just ready to go. But physically, I hadn't done any preparation at all. And so as soon as I signed up, I started walking 2 miles a day. I started preparing for that. And just like Melissa said, the trip was a challenge. It was challenging and it was hard. But also with the outcome from the coaching sessions, when Peter and I first talked, I'd found myself in this really vulnerable spot in my life. I thought that I would be talking to him about maybe a career change or furthering something entrepreneurial, saying that crazy. And instead it ended up being much more about self-awareness for me, which I also had discovered on the trip. So we had talked about this state of vulnerability and me feeling that I needed to be stronger and more confident in choices that I was making as a person. But when we were on the trip, I kind of attached myself to Peter a lot and stole a lot of his time from other participants. But he had asked me one question while we were on trek, and he just said, well, what does Kristen want? And this sounds like a very simple question, but for me, it was really vital for me to hear, because I'm a mother of 6 children. I get lost in the everyday, children's responsibilities, meals, household chores, all of these things. And I hadn't really stopped to ask myself that question in a really long time. And so for me, that was very eye-opening. And I would say since those months ago that him and I had our first session, when we did the follow-up sessions after trek, he had confirmed to me that there was a change, that I do definitely feel more confident and stronger today than I did when him and I initially first talked about that vulnerability that I was feeling. And it's given me drive to make choices that come from a root of strength, instead of feeling unsure and just insecure over it, or a sense of weakness. And also a few other outcomes that I wasn't expecting from the trip was one of the first days we discussed grief with the group. We had a day that we went and we watched a cremation, and this was kind of a big deal for all of us. And I remember in the group session, I said, if anyone was to ever say, do you want to go watch a cremation? I definitely would have said no. That's not something I think I've ever thought I would do in my life. But doing it together as a group and going through this cultural experience, it was strengthening, and it was very sacred, and caused us all to reflect. And as we discussed that as a group in the evening, it was really interesting to hear each person's perspective. And since then, one of the outcomes I didn't expect was that there's things that have happened in our life. It could even be something that maybe happened a year ago, or it could be something 15 years ago. And we have that opportunity to recognize it and to mourn it and to let it go and honor it as something that has provided strength. And that was definitely something I had never expected to get out of this soul safari experience.
Thanks, Kristen. So I just a couple of the questions here, and then I believe Jesse will take a minute to share as well. So the trip is not jam-packed. So it's kind of carefully laid out and pretty laid back. And the way that we do bring the coaching into the trip is through sessions in the morning. In the Nepal trip, I introduced a different topic like grief, like Kristen mentioned, in the morning. And in the evening, we would sort of have a circle and debrief. And some of those activities were aligned to what we discussed that day. So for example, grief, that day we did a lot of touring around Kathmandu and we witnessed a cremation. In Kenya, the Elephant Orphanage is the place that will provide the setting or the experience to help us talk about grief. And so we take maybe 30, 40 minutes in the morning, share and introduce a concept, and in the evening we have a debrief circle. And it was interesting. I was nervous about facilitating that at first. And, the first couple of days we kind of talked through it, and it was everything sort of went okay. But as the days got on, the discussions just kept getting longer and longer, and it was almost like we couldn't turn it off. So that was neat. And so I wanted to just share, this is what we used as well. So each participant got a little notebook like this. And the notebook has envelopes that have a place for pictures and some of the reflections inside, and a place to journal and take notes. And so we used this as sort of the framework for working through the structured part of the group coaching during the trip. So to answer Tom's question, it's definitely not rushed. Everything is planned out, so you don't have to think about or do anything. But there's plenty of time for reflecting and kind of taking it easy. Jesse, go ahead, and then we'll have John after that. We can't hear you. Maybe John, can we go to you for now while Jesse figures out the mic?
You wanted me to go?
Yeah,
Pete?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Hold on just a moment.
Jesse, you can say something too.
So I guess what I would say, my expectations when I was first thinking about it is, I like to travel and things, and I was thinking, I was definitely in a position where I had some things on my mind that I was working through, kind of some big decisions, some areas where I was trying to figure some things out. I had a question in my mind. I was like, okay, so if I get myself apart, like a really far away place, kind of away from my life, and think through these things, am I going to get some epiphany? And that was kind of my question. And I like to travel. So it's like, okay, if nothing else, it's going to be really interesting. But I was wondering if there would be some type of an epiphany. Anyways, I think we arrived Friday night. I think it was Sunday where I kind of had a major breakthrough. So 2 days, only basically 1 or 2 days into it. And then I had the rest of the week to kind of work through that epiphany and think through it. And so that, to me, it was just like on day 2, I was like, okay, this was already for me worth it. And then of course the rest of the trip was, really, really interesting and fun. I loved associating with everyone there, and loved just seeing the things there and talking with people and talking with Pete and getting advice. So from that standpoint, it was really good. And since then, came back with that epiphany, and I've been implementing it, and there's been, it wasn't just a clear path, but it's definitely played out exactly how that, how that had come to me. So I really enjoyed it. I've been pushing my wife to do one of the next ones. She wants to, she said.
Thanks, Tom. Jesse,
You bet.
give it a try again?
Let me know if that works.
Yeah, we gotcha.
Okay, so I'll go quick. I think echoing a lot of what other people said it was an opportunity to kind of step out, have a dedicated time for that reflection, but it's also like that guided reflection. And what was super useful for me was, I think, the third party, not just interacting with Peter, but with the other participants, I was able to, I guess, gain those insights like Pete was talking about, that it was things that you are maybe intuitive or are very self-evident, but it often takes that third person, that dialogue, to help engage that. And I was, I work for myself, and had come off a big job, working for a big company. And so there was a lot of kind of personal questions, not just about what I should do, but about, my personal values and how to access that and find joy in what I do. And I think it was a great experience to be able to go out, dedicate that time to myself, and then those insights from other people. It was paradigm expanding for sure.
Awesome.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Jesse. Before we wrap up here, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? That haven't been asked already? So go ahead and punch the questions. And I just got a note about the cost of the trips. And so the trips are geared to be very purpose oriented, and I've tried to make it as affordable as possible as well. This really isn't about creating a business out of it, yet without people coming and contributing on the trips, it's pretty difficult to promote and keep this together as something that's an option for people. And so the trips are capped out at 6 participants, ideally up to 8 maximum. And the cost of the trip is $4,500. That includes everything but the plane ticket and visa. I think for both of these trips, for most places in the States, you can fly there for about $1,000. And when I first launched this, I have put out for family and friends a 50% discount. I think the family and friends rate is $2,000. So that's something I would be willing to offer to anybody on this call. Okay, dates for Kenya, I believe, are the 1st of April through the 8th of April. And dates for South Africa are the 8th through the 15th of May. Okay, does one of the participants, an example of a breakthrough, a specific breakthrough? Maybe Jesse or John or Melissa? I think Kristen shared some good concrete examples for her.
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
So the thing I was kind of the main thing, I had an issue at work that I was trying to work through, a unnegotiated, or not fully negotiated contract. So I Pete and I walked through it on our pre-coaching. Pete does 2 pre-coaching sessions. I think, Pete, you're going to continue doing that in the future.
Yeah.
So we walked through that, and Pete kind of just reflects what you're saying and tries to help you dig in and figure out really what the issue is. And I was basically deciding, should I quit my job and go do what I really want to do, which was, kind of difficult at the time for me, like very difficult, or keep doing it and, not liking it, or, something else. Anyway, one of the first things Pete said when we were doing the coaching, and I think when I first arrived there, is, sometimes we think it's A or B, but sometimes you can set things up in a way where you can have both A and B. And, I think we've all kind of heard that type of thing before, but that was good for me to hear in this situation. And so then as we talked through different things, and, in one of the meetings we had, especially, there was kind of this realization, wait, there's actually a way where I could do both. And then it took me, a little bit of time to kind of work through that a little bit, but that was the big epiphany. There's a way I can actually do both. And so I've been able to work through that, and it's been really good. I'm much more at peace with my work situation, and things are starting to get traction with the thing I really am interested in. So that was the breakthrough for me.
I have to add too, for John, unbeknownst to me, his wife Sarah was trying to talk him out of coming because she thought John was going to come and realize he had to quit his job and leave. And I didn't know that, so there was a lot of pressure there in the background that I was totally unaware of. But it was incredible to facilitate the experience for John that he described, and him realizing I can keep my job and what's important to me that comes from my job, and that doesn't have to prevent me from working on something else that I've wanted to do for a long time. So that was neat. Thank you for sharing that, John. I think with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So if anyone wants to email or call or chat, I'm keen, I'm eager to hear what you have to say and your thoughts. I'd love to have you on a soul safari or be part of a conversation. And just so you know, we have been running something on our Facebook page to do free one-on-one coaching sessions for a 45-minute session. And so I do individual coaching as well as the Soul Safari trips. So if you're interested, or anyone that you know is interested, I'd be happy to chat with you about that. But thank you all for showing up. I really, really appreciate the participation, the support, and thrilled that you can share this time with me. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.